The first thing my youngest daughter noticed when she walked through my front door that October evening was not my face. It was the cold. She had driven 4 hours from Sudbury, through the gray stretch of highway that cuts across northern Ontario, arriving just after 7 in the evening with a bag of groceries she had picked up at the Loblaws off the 400. She told me later that she had stopped there on impulse, something nagging at her from our last phone call, something she could not name. She had grabbed a rotisserie chicken, some soup, a few apples, nothing dramatic, just a feeling. She knocked. I did not answer right away because I had fallen asleep on the couch under 2 blankets and my winter coat. My winter coat. In October. Inside my own home. When I finally opened the door, she stepped in and stopped moving. She stood in my hallway and looked at me the way you look at something that does not match what you expected to find. Then she looked past me, into the living room, and I watched her face change. "Mom," she said quietly, "why is it so dark in here?" I told her the lamp was broken. She walked to the wall switch and turned on the overhead light. The room looked exactly as small and bare as it was. The television was off. The side table had nothing on it. The kitchen, which she could see from the hallway, had clean counters. Perfectly clean, because there was nothing on them. "Mom," she said again, and this time her voice had a different texture to it. "When did you last eat today?" I told her I had some crackers around noon. She set the grocery bag down on the floor. She did not say anything for a long moment. She walked to the thermostat on the wall and looked at it. 16 degrees. It was 16 degrees inside my house in October, and I was wearing my winter coat on my own couch. My name is Beverly Okafor. I am 69 years old. I am a retired administrative coordinator from the Simcoe County District School Board, where I worked for 28 years. My husband Cornelius passed away in the spring 3 years before all of this happened, after a short illness that moved faster than any of us were prepared for. We had been married for 31 years. I do not say that to set a mood. I say it because the grief of losing him is what made everything that followed possible. Grief makes you porous. It lets things in that a whole person would not allow. My son is 38 years old. His name is Theodore. He has his father's height and his father's way of walking into a room like he already knows where everything is. I loved him completely. I still love him, though the shape of that love has changed in ways I am still learning to understand. His wife is a woman named Cassandra. She and Theodore met when they were both working in property management in Barrie. She is sharp, organized, and she has a way of framing things that makes the unreasonable sound like common sense. I did not dislike her in the beginning. I want to be honest about that. I did not dislike her. My daughter's name is Priya. She is 34. She has my mother's eyes and her father's stubbornness, and she works as a registered nurse at Health Sciences North in Sudbury. She and I have always been close in the way that some mothers and daughters are, not without friction, but with a kind of bedrock understanding between us. For the first 8 months after Cornelius died, I was not myself. I say this plainly because it is the truth. I was functioning. I was going through the motions. I was eating and sleeping and answering the phone when it rang, but I was not fully present inside any of it. The grief sat on me like weather. Some days it was a light overcast and I could move through the day with some normalcy. Other days it was something heavier than that. Theodore and Cassandra came to visit me often in those early months. They brought food. They helped me with the house. Theodore fixed the fence that Cornelius had been meaning to fix for 2 summers. Cassandra organized Cornelius's paperwork, his insurance documents, his pension records from the township of Springwater, where he had worked in facilities management for 22 years. It was Cassandra who first suggested that I let her help manage my finances. She sat across from me at my kitchen table one evening in November of that first year, with a cup of tea she had made herself, and she said it the way you say something that is obviously reasonable. She said that I seemed overwhelmed. She said that the paperwork alone, between Cornelius's estate and my own pension and the utility bills and the property tax, was a lot for anyone to manage while also grieving. She said she had a background in financial administration from her work in property management. She said she just wanted to help. I remember thinking that it was kind. I remember thinking that Cornelius would have been grateful to know that Theodore had married someone so capable and organized. I said yes. I want you to understand the context of that yes. I was 8 months out from losing my husband of 31 years. I was 66 years old. I was not incapacitated. I was not diagnosed with anything. I was grieving, and grief had made me tired in a way that sleep did not fix, and someone I trusted sat across from me and offered to carry something heavy. I said yes. We went to the bank together, Cassandra and I, on a Thursday morning. She drove. She had already printed out the forms we would need. The branch manager was a young man who spoke quickly and seemed to be running behind on something. Cassandra did most of the talking. I signed where she pointed. I was added to a joint account. My pension deposits, which at that time were just over $6,000 a month from the school board's pension plan, plus a small survivor benefit from Cornelius's township pension, were redirected into that account. I did not read everything I signed. I want to say that slowly, because I need you to hear it. I did not read everything I signed. I trusted the person sitting next to me, and I was tired, and I thought this was a temporary arrangement to help me through a hard season. I did not imagine it as a permanent condition. By the following spring, I began to notice things. Small things at first. The natural gas bill was overdue when I picked it up from the mailbox. I asked Cassandra about it, and she said she had already taken care of it, that it was a bank processing delay, not to worry. The credit on my Rogers account disappeared, and when I called, they told me my pre-authorized payment had not come through. Again, Cassandra had an explanation. There were small errors, timing issues, nothing to be concerned about. By the fall of the second year, the things I was noticing were no longer small. My refrigerator had very little in it. I was managing on a narrow rotation of food that I bought with the small amount of cash Cassandra transferred to my personal checking account each month. She had set up a monthly transfer of $300. $300 from a pension income of over $6,000 a month for all of my groceries, my personal needs, my prescriptions. I was taking a medication for blood pressure that I had been on for 4 years. When my prescription ran out, I called the pharmacy and was told there was a balance owing on my account that had not been cleared. I did not have enough in my checking account to cover the cost that month. I called Cassandra. She told me she would take care of it. She did not. I went 6 weeks without that medication. When I try to explain now why I did not call my daughter, why I did not call anyone, I find that the answer is not simple. Part of it was shame. I was a 67-year-old woman who had worked her entire adult life, who had managed a household and raised 2 children and sat on the school board's administrative team for nearly 3 decades, and I could not explain to anyone why I had signed away access to my own money to my daughter-in-law. The shame of it was profound. Part of it was that Cassandra had, over time, made me feel that any concern I raised was an imposition. She was busy. Theodore was busy. They were doing me a favor. When I did bring something up, Cassandra's responses had a quality that I can only describe as patient condescension, the kind of tone that communicates very clearly that you are being difficult, that you are not understanding how much is being done for you, that you should be grateful rather than asking questions. And part of it, the part that is hardest to admit, was that Theodore knew. He knew, or he knew enough. He had been in our family home. He had opened my refrigerator. He had seen the thermostat. He had heard me say I was cold. And he had looked at the floor or changed the subject or deferred to Cassandra, and I did not want to believe that my son, Cornelius's son, the boy I had raised with every good thing I had in me, was choosing to let this happen. So I stayed quiet. I managed. I wore my coat inside. I ate crackers and soup. I stopped filling prescriptions I could not afford. I told myself it was temporary. It was not temporary. By the time Priya drove through my front door in October of the 3rd year, I had lost 11 pounds. The heat had been set to 16 because Cassandra had called the gas company and reduced my thermostat threshold on the account, which she controlled. My phone still worked, but Priya told me later that 3 of her calls over the prior 2 months had gone to voicemail, and that when she asked me about it, I had given her vague answers she had attributed to my being tired. Priya is a nurse. She stood in my living room and looked at me with clinical eyes that were also the eyes of my child, and I watched her arrive at a conclusion that I had been trying to protect her from. She asked me to sit down. She asked me when I last had a proper meal. She asked me about my medication. She asked me about the heat. She did not raise her voice. She asked each question carefully, like she was doing an intake assessment, because in a way she was. I told her the truth. Not all of it at once, not in any organized way, but I told her. The account, the $300, the prescription, the gas bill, the phone calls where I had said everything was fine because I did not want her to worry, and I did not know what I would say if she asked me how it had come to this. She listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, she sat with it for a moment. Then she got up and went to the kitchen and started making dinner from the groceries she had brought, and she talked to me through the kitchen doorway while she cooked, asking clarifying questions in a steady voice, and I understood that she was doing this, making dinner and asking questions in a steady voice, because she needed time to manage her own reaction before she did anything else. She stayed that night. She slept in the spare room. I heard her on the phone at midnight, quietly, and I assumed she was talking to her partner. She was not. She was talking to a friend from nursing school who had gone into social work and now worked with the Ontario Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse. The next morning, over coffee, she told me what she had learned. She did not present it as accusation. She presented it as information. What had happened to me had a name. It was called financial elder abuse, and it was more common than most people understood, and the person responsible for it was not always a stranger. She told me that the way my money had been accessed, the joint account, the redirected pension, the controlled transfers, constituted what her contact believed was a textbook case. She told me that in Ontario, what had been done to me could be prosecuted. She also told me something I had not fully understood. She told me that Theodore, by having been present and aware and having taken no action to report or intervene, was potentially also legally liable, not just Cassandra, both of them. I want to tell you what happened when Priya told me that, because I think it is the most important moment in this whole story. I did not cry. I had expected to cry. What I felt instead was something very still, very cold, and very clear. Like the first morning after a long storm when the air is completely sharp. I said, "What do we do?" We moved quickly after that. Priya had taken 3 days off work. She had a plan. The first thing we did was go to my bank branch in Priya explained the situation clearly and asked for an immediate review of account activity. The manager, a woman in her 50s named Darlene, who had a very direct way of listening, took notes without expression and asked me several questions to confirm my identity and my understanding of what I was requesting. What we found, once the account history was printed and laid out on that conference table, was not what I had been prepared for. The joint account I had been redirected to had been used as a transit point. My pension deposits came in, and within 48 hours, the vast majority was transferred out to 2 other accounts. Over the course of 26 months, a total of just over $140,000 had passed through and been moved. The $300 monthly transfers to my personal checking were the only amounts that remained accessible to me. $140,000. Darlene asked me to remain calm, which I found almost funny, because I was perhaps the calmest person in the room at that point. She told me she was required to flag the account activity and that I should expect a call from the bank's fraud and elder financial abuse team. She helped me, that same day, close the joint account and open a new sole ownership account with a different account number and a different institution for the pension redirect, which Priya had already researched and prearranged. The pension redirect took 11 days to take effect. During those 11 days, we arranged for my income to be temporarily held at the pension office level until the new account was active. On the second day, we went to the Ontario Provincial Police Detachment in Barrie. Priya came with me. I gave a formal statement. I brought the bank printouts. I brought the original joint account agreement. I explained the timeline, the medication, the heat, the isolation. The officer who took my statement was a woman about Priya's age who wrote everything down methodically and told me that she would be contacting the Elder Abuse Unit. Charges were eventually laid against Cassandra and against Theodore. I need to stop here and tell you about Theodore because I do not want this to be a story that makes him a cartoon. He is not a cartoon. He is a man I raised, a man I love, and a man who made choices that I will spend the rest of my life trying to understand. He did not initiate what happened. The account arrangement was Cassandra's idea and Cassandra's execution. But he knew the transfers were happening. He knew what I was living on. He knew about the medication because he had been there when I mentioned it, and he had said nothing and done nothing. In Ontario, failing to report the financial abuse of a dependent adult under certain conditions carries its own legal weight. Theodore's lawyer argued that I had not been legally classified as a dependent adult and that his awareness did not constitute participation. The court did not fully agree. He was not charged with the same offenses as Cassandra, but he faced a civil judgment and a formal finding that he had breached a duty of care. He was ordered to repay his share of the funds that had been traced to accounts he had access to. Cassandra was charged with theft over $5,000 and criminal financial exploitation of a vulnerable person. She pled guilty to a reduced charge after negotiation. She received a conditional sentence, mandatory repayment, and a criminal record. I will not pretend that the outcome felt like triumph. It felt like something more complicated than that. It felt like the end of something that I had loved for a long time and the beginning of something I was going to have to build from what was left. Priya stayed with me for 3 weeks. She helped me restore the heat. She filled my prescriptions. She stocked my refrigerator. She helped me contact my family doctor, who had not seen me in 14 months and who referred me immediately to a cardiologist because of the gap in my blood pressure medication. I was fortunate. My numbers were high, but I had not experienced a cardiac event. She helped me find a certified financial planner through the Financial Planning Association of Canada, who specialized in elder financial planning. We set up a proper structure, not a family trustee, not a joint account, but a formal arrangement with a regulated professional who was bonded, accountable, and had no personal stake in my money. My pension is now deposited directly to my own account. No one else has access to it unless I authorize a specific transaction in writing. I also changed my will. I had a lawyer review every document I had signed in the 3 years since Cornelius's death. 2 of them required corrective action. I changed my locks. I want to tell you something that I was not expecting to feel in the months after all of this. I was not expecting to feel embarrassed about the fact that I had let it happen. I had expected anger. I had expected grief, the particular grief of losing a son you thought you knew, but the embarrassment was the thing that snuck up on me. I want to speak to that because I think it matters. There is a story we tell about elder financial abuse that places the responsibility on the person who was abused. We say, how did she not see it? Why did she sign that? Why did she not call someone sooner? We treat it as a failure of vigilance, as though the person who was targeted should have been harder to reach. But grief removes the hard edges. Grief makes you trust the people who are already inside your circle. It makes you want to lean on the people who love you, and it makes you want to believe that they love you well. Cassandra did not target a foolish woman. She targeted a grieving woman. And those are not the same thing. I was not foolish. I was human. If you are watching this and you are caring for an aging parent, I want to say something directly. Love is not the same as access. You can love your mother completely and still not have her banking credentials. You can love your father and still not be the sole name on his financial accounts. Real love does not require that kind of control, and if someone is pushing for that kind of access, the reason they give will always sound reasonable, and you should ask yourself what happens if it goes wrong. If you are watching this and you are the parent, I want to say something to you as well. The arrangement I agreed to felt like help. It looked like help. It came from someone who sat at my kitchen table and made me tea and knew exactly how to frame a request so that saying no felt ungrateful. I want you to know that you are allowed to say no. You are allowed to say, I appreciate the offer, and I will handle my own accounts. You are allowed to hire a professional. You are allowed to ask your lawyer to review anything before you sign it. These are not acts of mistrust. They are acts of self-respect. And if something feels wrong, please call someone. Not to confirm that your suspicions are valid, just to have another set of eyes on your situation. In Ontario, the Seniors Safety Line is available 24 hours a day. The number is 1-866-299-1011. They do not judge. They help. I live alone now in my home in Barrie. The heat is set to 21 degrees. My refrigerator has food in it. I have seen my cardiologist twice this year, and my blood pressure is managed and stable. I talk to Priya on the phone every few days. Last month she came to visit and we drove out to Wasaga Beach and walked along the shore in the November cold, and she held my arm and we did not talk about any of this, we just walked, and I thought about how lucky I am that she came home that October evening with a bag of groceries and a feeling she could not name. I am not the same person I was before this happened, but I am still here. I am still using my voice, not to make noise, but to make sure the people listening have what they need to protect themselves or the people they love. That is enough. That is more than enough. And if this story found you at a moment when you needed to hear it, then I am glad I told it.